I am currently 19 years old, a high school student. I almost died today, and my hands are still shaking. Because of my dad's friend's father's funeral, neither of my parents was at home today, and I was lying down on my bed to sleep around 2 a.m. after putting an online application in university. Before that, I went to the convenience store in front of my house around 11 p.m., and I think I forgot to lock the front door. I could see the front door sensor light turned on through my door that was slightly open. Are they back? At that moment, there was a cough outside, and I instinctively noticed that they were not my parents. I got out of bed right away, closed and locked the door quietly. In case the light would escape outside if I turned on the light, I went under the desk and quietly called the police on my cell phone. I think there's someone in my house. When I spoke quietly but clearly, the police replied that they would send the other police soon. About 10 minutes later, there was still no contact from the police. Shaking with fear, I approached the door to check the sound and heard the sound of opening the refrigerator door. It was certain that someone was in my house. My hands were shaking, and my heart was beating like crazy. The person outside started to open the door one by one, but this time he tried to open my door. When he noticed my room was locked, he started turning the doorknob a few times, and it soon became quiet. A few seconds later, suddenly someone knocked on my door. "Police, open the door, please." But I couldn't hear the front door open. He kept turning the doorknob, and I started crying, being frozen. Just then, the police siren began to hear. As soon as I opened the window and screamed like crazy, the police came in with 911 emergency technicians opening our door. The house was soon full of police and technicians. But, strangely, I couldn't see the man. I cried and explained all the circumstances, but there was no trace of him anywhere. To take me to the hospital, one of the technicians raised me up, who was shaking at that time. The rest of the police were about to leave my house, and then someone cursed loudly. The man was hiding in the washing machine. The police arrested him right there. After I ended up moving to the hospital, I told my parents about it. Both of them immediately returned home right away, and my dad headed for the police station. I don't know what happened after that, but I probably won't be able to open the lid of the washing machine now and forever. I hope those of you who see this always lock the door securely.
One of my friends was living in a dormitory for a while. He ended up renting a room after fighting with his roommate, who did not get along well. The house was very cheap, near the school, and the transportation around it was quite comfortable. So he signed the contract right away, saying he was lucky. I was doubtful of the ridiculously cheap price, but shrugged it off, thinking, hope everything's okay. But nothing much happened for a year. However, I couldn't see my friend at some point. He was not seen not only in the classroom, but also in frequently visited restaurants, bars, or anywhere else at all. First of all, I began to worry about him. Thinking there might be something urgent going on in his house, I kind of put down my worries. It had been more than 5 days. Being nervous, I ended up going to his house. However, there was no answer from inside, no matter how many times I knocked and called his name. Thinking he might have really gone to his home, I was about to turn around, and I inadvertently turned the doorknob of his house. But somehow the door was open. "Hey, are you in there?" The moment I went inside, I couldn't move at all, getting goosebumps all over my body. The walls of the living room were covered with blood. Strangely, there were countless bloodstains on the walls of the height of the doorknob only, as if they were dotted with some kind of red paint. At that moment, I noticed that someone who looked like my friend was curled up in a blanket on the bed. I headed to the bed carefully. "Hey, I was worried. What happened?" Saying this, I tried to roll up the blanket with one hand, but it didn't go up easily. It felt like the blanket had attached to something, so I tried to lift it with both hands. The moment I lifted it, it fell off with a sticky noise. And it was my friend, who was dead with blood all over his body. After his blood flowed from the body and hardened, the blanket and body were stuck together. His eyes were wide open, and he seemed to be in extreme fear right before he died. I screamed and immediately reported it to the police. They initially suspected me, who was the first discoverer, but soon after, when the autopsy and investigation were over, they gave me the details. The cause of his death was excessive bleeding. The other part of his body was perfectly fine, and he had no stab wounds or cuts. But every second joint of his 10 fingers was torn out. All the blood on the wall belongs to my friend, and almost half his blood was gone. It was concluded that he died of excessive bleeding while tapping and scratching on the wall, so that his fingers all torn out. It didn't make sense. Perhaps he saw something in the room and found a doorknob to escape, but couldn't open it. The blood was covered on the wall only because he knocked the wall about the height of a doorknob frantically. And later, he hid under the blanket for some reason, but eventually died because of too much bleeding. Then, what was it my friend did see in his room?
Before we start, I want to show you guys something that you might need very much.
In December of 2006, I was 15 years old at the time. I had an extreme fear of the dark. While laying in bed, I would always cover my mirror, or I'd face the opposite side of the room that my mirror was on. I'd also make sure that I didn't stare at any dark corners of my room, along with my closet, which was a very dark space that I couldn't help but face because it was on the opposite side of the room from my mirror. The next thing was that if I look in the mirror from my bed, I could see my closet. So one night, for some reason, I decided that I wanted to get over my fear of the dark. When I went to bed, I didn't cover up my mirror, didn't put my head under the covers, nor did I face the opposite side of the room from my mirror. I laid down, turned my lamp off, and stared at my mirror. Then I guess I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was looking at my door. Then I panned my eyes over to my mirror. And to my surprise, there was someone standing in the darkness of my closet that I saw in the mirror. I fumbled to turn on my lamp, and I looked at my closet, but no one was there. I told my parents what happened. For some reason, they said it was my imagination. My 15-year-old imagination, I guess. I told them that I wasn't 3 years old and I know what I saw. A week later, I got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, surprisingly seeing the same dark figure in my mirror, but he was closer to my bed, a lot closer. I ran screaming out of my room and told my parents again. I told them that there's no way that I would sleep in my room again. So my father said he was sleeping there starting the next night, in which I pleaded for him not to do it. Of course, he didn't listen and went in.